in late August of 2023. Concerned relatives of 69-year-old Shirley Smith tried to check on her at the motel room she shared with her daughter in Foley, Alabama. 36-year-old Katie Smith answered the door but refused to let anyone come inside, claiming that her mother was sleeping and didn't want to be disturbed. Determined to get inside the room, Shirley's granddaughter showed up with the motel's owner. Katie continued refusing to let anyone in and became increasingly volatile, yelling and pounding on the young woman's car. The tantrum continued until Shirley's granddaughter called the police, at which point Katie ran off into the woods. In the meantime, the granddaughter entered the hotel room and found Shirley's body in a wheelbarrow, wrapped in a sheet. She had been bludgeoned, stabbed, and strangled to death. Nearly 2 days later, police found Katie and arrested her on suspicion of abusing a corpse, resisting arrest, attempting to elude, trespassing, and disorderly conduct. She was also now the prime suspect in her mother's homicide. In November 2024, a grand jury indicted Katie on her original charges along with 1 count of murder. She's been in custody since her arrest due to an inability to afford bail, and the judge raised her bond from $35,000 to $185,000 following the indictment, making it even more unlikely that she'll secure her freedom amid the ongoing case. Number 18. Thomas Ray Lopez. On February 24, 2022, 26-year-old Sabrina Calderon showed up at an emergency room in Roosevelt County, New Mexico, covered in bruises and other injuries, accompanied by her on and off boyfriend, 33-year-old Thomas Ray Lopez. She initially claimed she had fallen down some stairs. Suspecting that the woman wasn't telling them the truth and worried for her safety, staff members called law enforcement. By the time deputies arrived, Lopez had slipped out of the hospital and disappeared. Calderon revealed that Lopez had abducted her from her home and driven her to a remote ranch, where he bound her to a chair. He held Calderon captive for weeks, confining her to a small room and denying her access to the restroom. Lopez kept the woman under constant surveillance, and when she tried to escape or contact her family for help, he beat her. He finally took her to the hospital after another woman saw the extent of her injuries and urged him to get help for Calderon. Shortly before going to the emergency room, Lopez beat the victim full force with golf clubs, punched her with closed fists, bit her ear, strangled her, and pulled her around by her hair. After arriving at the hospital, Calderon was airlifted to another facility that was better equipped to treat her injuries. She died 2 days later. Police visited the ranch where Lopez was staying and found him hiding in a vent. In March 2023, Lopez pleaded guilty to murder, kidnapping, and resisting, evading, or obstructing an officer. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison and is only required to serve 85% of his sentence, which means he'll likely be released after serving just 15 years. Number 17. Alejandro Gonzalez. When Teresa de Jesus Cruz Rubio failed to attend her 50th surprise birthday party in September 2024, her family immediately grew concerned. They waited a few hours, then drove to her Glendale, Arizona home. No one answered the door, and they couldn't reach Cruz Rubio, so they called a locksmith and gained entry into the home. Once inside, they found Cruz Rubio's decapitated body, which was covered in stab wounds. On the kitchen counter, there was a butcher block containing a knife with blood and hair on it, and there was also blood in the shower, which had been left running. A car that Cruz Rubio had borrowed from her sister was missing from the driveway, leading to the suspicion that the woman's son, 25-year-old Alejandro Gonzalez, was responsible for her murder. He had been released from jail in an unrelated case less than a day before his mother's death. The following day, police located the vehicle and found Gonzalez, who was covered in blood and had injuries to his arms and hands. During questioning, he reportedly admitted to fatally stabbing his mother while high on methamphetamine. He also blamed the crime on an unnamed black man, who he claimed he used drugs with on the street prior to Cruz Rubio's murder. Police have found no evidence that anyone other than Gonzalez was involved in the crime. According to court documents, family members told law enforcement that Gonzalez suffers from mental health issues and was capable of killing his mother. Following his confession, he was booked into the Maricopa County Jail on suspicion of first-degree murder and theft of means of transportation. He remains in custody, with bond set at $1 million. Number 16. Michael Dean Davis Jr. 27-year-old Mahogany Washington and her son, were reported missing in Buffalo, Texas in June of 2024 by family members who told police that they had not seen or heard from the pair since nearly 2 years earlier in July of 2022. In October, law enforcement searched Washington's last known address and found her remains. Shortly thereafter, authorities received a tip that the father of Washington's child, 27-year-old Michael Dean Davis Jr., was living with the missing boy in Laredo, roughly 130 miles from the Buffalo property. After determining that Davis had violent tendencies and that he was likely armed and possibly a threat to his son, multiple law enforcement agencies came together and carefully coordinated a plan of approach. Armed with a search warrant, officers staked themselves out near the front of the property and made their move when Davis came outside to check his mail. While searching the property, police found the boy unharmed, along with several rifles, gas masks, and an armor suit. Davis was arrested on suspicion of murder and is also facing a child endangerment charge due to the squalid condition of the home. Following his arrest, he was extradited to Leon County, where he remains in custody with bond set at $3 million. Number 15. Kelsey Glover. In November 2024, Osceola County deputies responded to a reported armed disturbance at a Poinciana, Florida home. Upon arriving at the scene, they encountered a woman who was trying to attack another woman with a hammer. Identified by law enforcement as 35-year-old Kelsey Glover, the suspect was trying to strike her roommate, who had tried to prevent Glover from harming her teenage daughter, Giselle. While speaking with the visibly injured roommate, the deputies learned that Giselle was unresponsive in an upstairs bathroom. According to the roommate, Giselle was taking a bath when Glover entered the bathroom and held her daughter's head underwater. The witness tried to intervene but was unsuccessful because Glover attacked her and began chasing her around the house with a hammer. Giselle was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital, and authorities launched a homicide investigation. In the meantime, Glover was booked into jail on suspicion of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and battery. Records show that she has also been charged with premeditated murder. During her perp walk, Glover could be seen with an ear-to-ear grin on her face as she was led down a hallway by multiple police officers. Seemingly unfazed by the media hype surrounding the case, she continued smiling as she exited the building and was immediately surrounded by members of the press. She remains held without bail pending the outcome of the case. Number 14. Javier, Alex Martell, and Jennifer Brema. 51-year-old Kimberly Bell vanished without a trace in Denver, Colorado in July of 2019 when she stopped showing up at her job as a limo driver. She was reported missing the following month by her sister, and her car was found abandoned in a park. Her body has never been found, but the authorities are confident that she was murdered, and in November 2024, 2 suspects were charged in connection with the case. 30-year-old Javier Alex Martell and 38-year-old Jennifer Brema were the last 2 people seen with Bell, but without a body connecting them to the missing woman's murder proved to be complicated. A cold case team took over the case in 2021, and their efforts eventually procured enough evidence to justify charging the suspects even in the absence of Bell's remains. According to investigators with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Bell was in her car with Martell and Brema, both of whom she was acquainted with, when Martell, who was sitting in the back seat, strangled her from behind. While his exact reasons for attacking the victim have not been revealed, prosecutors claimed that Martell was upset with Bell when he murdered her. After killing Bell, Martell instructed Brema to drive to a Home Depot store, where he bought an axe and several other items. He used the axe to dismember Bell's body and placed garbage bags filled with her remains in a dumpster outside a veterinary clinic. Shortly after Martell and Brema's arrests, a sheriff's spokesperson said that there are still some unclear aspects to the case and that the investigation is therefore ongoing. Martell remains in custody at the Douglas County Jail with bail set at $10 million, and Brema is currently free on bail. Number 13. Carrie Bedrick. In August of 2024, 32-year-old Carrie Bedrick tried to outrun law enforcement in Suffolk County, New York, while high on methamphetamine, resulted in the death of her young son, Eli D. Henrys. Reaching speeds of 100 miles per hour, the Long Island resident drove the wrong way down the South State Parkway with the boy in the back seat, resulting in a deadly 4-car wreck. Police found Bedrick standing next to her vehicle in a seemingly confused state. They noticed that her speech was slurred as she responded to their question about where she was going with, "I honestly don't know." When questioned about her suspected drug use, she identified some pills in her purse as hypertension medication and methamphetamine, referring to them as her prescriptions. In addition to the death of Bedrick's son, 2 other victims, 29-year-old Heidi Mayer and 24-year-old David Picard, survived the collision with minor injuries. At the time of the crash, Bedrick was driving on a suspended license, which had previously been suspended 56 times. She also has a previous DWI conviction from 2012. Bedrick is facing 21 charges, including 2 counts of second-degree murder, aggravated vehicular homicide, first-degree manslaughter, second-degree manslaughter, second-degree assault, aggravated driving while intoxicated with a passenger under 16 and endangering the welfare of a child. If convicted of the most serious charge, she'll face 25 years to life in prison. Many wondered why the authorities didn't do more to stop Bedrick from getting behind the wheel, given her atrocious driving record. In an editorial, the New York Post staff admonished New York State politicians for droning about safety and prevention, yet failing to take action against someone. Bedrick's defense attorney, Scott Zerner, told the court that she suffers from a host of medical ailments, including narcolepsy, epilepsy, and spina bifida. Describing the car crash as a tragic accident, he urged the court to set an affordable bail amount so his client could attend her son's funeral. Seemingly unmoved by the request, the judge set bail at $1 million, and Bedrick remains in custody as she awaits her next court date, which is scheduled for December 12th. Number 12. Matthew Brenan. In July of 2023, police responded to reports of groaning, yelling, and banging at an apartment in Hopkins, Minnesota. Upon arriving at the scene, they found the body of 33-year-old U.S. Army veteran Danica Bergerson wrapped in blankets and a garbage bag. In the bathroom, officers found Bergerson's abusive on- and off-boyfriend, 39-year-old Matthew Brenan, grunting and growling. Just 11 days earlier, he had been released from jail for beating Bergerson up, and there was an active restraining order in place banning him from contacting or going near the victim. Brennan's recent jail sentence stemmed from a domestic dispute that happened in May of that year. About a month prior to that incident, Brenan had been arrested for biting and hitting Bergerson while intoxicated. He was released the following day, only to end up back in custody weeks later. While investigating the crime scene where Bergerson's body was found, police found a note Brenan had written stating that he had blacked out and lost control. He also wrote that he was very sad and remorseful about his actions, but it is what it is. In the note, Brenan wrote that it was his first time ever hurting a woman. This was untrue, according to Bergerson's father, David, who told the Star Tribune that the family always feared getting a phone call that Brenan had killed her. Several months earlier, Brenan had bragged about giving Bergerson a black eye in text messages to a friend, adding that she deserved it. A medical examiner was unable to identify Bergerson's cause of death, but the case was classified as a homicide based on her injuries and other evidence. Brenan was arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder while committing a felony and second-degree murder while under a restraining order for protection. He was later indicted on a first-degree murder charge, which would have come with a life sentence in the event of a conviction, but he took a plea deal in 2024 and admitted to second-degree murder while committing a felony in exchange for a nearly 24-year sentence with credit for more than a year of time served. His incarceration record lists an anticipated release date of May 2039, which means that he'll likely serve less than his full term behind bars. Number 11. Sha Tobin Locklear. In December 2022, a 28-year-old Red Springs, North Carolina man named Joshua Hunt was found dead in a ditch between 2 homes in the town of Maxton. Robeson County deputies responded to the scene at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night. 3 days later, 19-year-old Sha Tobin Locklear Jr., 18-year-old Nakia Gage Locklear, and a third unnamed teenager were arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder, while out on bond for the murder charge and several other pending criminal cases nearly a year later in November 2023. Sean Locklear cut off his ankle monitor Law enforcement received an alert that the device had been tampered with and obtained an arrest warrant. When deputies came to arrest Locklear, he opened fire on them, leading to a brief shootout before he ran off into the woods with multiple gunshot wounds. He then stole a patrol car, but he was badly injured and in need of medical care. 2 deputies were also injured in the exchange of bullets. After being treated at a hospital, Locklear was booked into custody. His previous murder case is ongoing, and in 2024 he was indicted on federal charges including drug trafficking, carjacking with intent to cause serious bodily injury. He also faces 3 gun-related counts including possession of a machine gun in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime, and discharging a firearm in conjunction with a crime of violence. If convicted as charged, Locklear will face a minimum sentence of 40 years and a maximum of life in prison. Number 10. Andrew Poteet McGill. On April 1st, 2017, 25-year-old Andrew Poteet McGill axe-murdered 61-year-old Mary Ann Morehouse at a ranch near Glencoe, New Mexico. He struck the victim so viciously that he decapitated her, then proceeded to baptize himself in a nearby creek. McGill then hitched a ride with a passing motorist to the Ruidoso Downs Police Department, where he confessed to chopping a woman's head off. He also said that he was Jesus Christ and that he had to kill his victim in order to save the world. After being taken to a hospital, he got into a struggle with 2 deputies, one of whom dropped his gun on the floor. McGill picked up the weapon and shot the deputy in the arm with it before being subdued. According to prosecutors, the accused killer was suffering from paranoia and hallucinations on the day of Morehouse's murder. He threatened his wife and daughter, caused thousands of dollars worth of damage to a hotel room, and began driving westward toward Ruidoso. During the drive, McGill parked his truck on the side of the road and walked to the ranch where Morehouse worked as a caretaker. In May of 2019, McGill pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to commit a violent felony upon a peace officer, and 1 count of possession of a firearm by a felon. He had initially pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the defense reluctantly entered the plea agreement after an expert testified that McGill was sane when he committed his crimes. He was sentenced to 51 years in prison, with 6 years suspended. Number 9. Isaac Pence. In April 2023, emergency responders were called to the scene of a reported stabbing during a party at a vacation rental cabin in Logan, Ohio. Upon arriving at the property, they found 22-year-old Charles Starner lying in the gravel driveway with multiple stab wounds. Starner was airlifted to the hospital where he died from his injuries. By the time law enforcement arrived at the scene, the suspected killer, 20-year-old Isaac Tyler Pence, had fled the scene with his girlfriend, 21-year-old Sabra Sue Flagg. Witnesses told officers that Pence had stabbed Starner during a drug and alcohol-fueled altercation involving many partygoers. Police located Pence and Flagg at a home in Fairfield County several hours later and took them into custody. The pair had made several stops during the drive, including to hide the murder weapon. During questioning, Pence gave investigators a much different version of events than all the other party guests who were present during the stabbing. He seemed confident that he could fool everyone in the room, but was booked into jail on a murder charge. Flagg also gave contradictory statements, but eventually admitted that she had lied in an attempt to cover for Pence. She was charged with obstructing justice and tampering with evidence. Pence claimed that he had acted in self-defense, while prosecutors argued that he had a reputation for violence within the community. In August 2024, a jury found Pence guilty of murder, 2 counts of felonious assault and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 18 years to life in prison. Flagg pleaded guilty to felony obstruction of justice and was sentenced to 6 months in prison, with credit for time served, sparing her from any more time behind bars. Number 8. Keith Brent Kwiecinski. 65-year-old Patricia Falkenstern of Ann Arbor, Michigan, had an unconventional relationship with her neighbor, 61-year-old Keith Brent Kwiecinski. They were both heavy drinkers who spent considerable time together, often treating one another's apartments as a shared living space, but they did not appear to be romantically committed to each other. In August of 2022, a Meals on Wheels worker attempted to drop off some food at Falkenstern's apartment and was greeted by Kwiecinski, who said that Falkenstern was sleeping. When the worker returned the next day, Kwiecinski answered the door and once again claimed that Falkenstern was asleep. It was highly unusual for Falkenstern not to answer her door, causing the Meals on Wheels worker to become concerned enough for her well-being to contact law enforcement. When police attempted to conduct a welfare check, Kwiecinski answered the door. He claimed that Falkenstern wasn't home and that he didn't know where she was. But when officers asked if they could come inside and look around, he was extremely reluctant to let them inside the apartment. The police concluded that they had probable cause to enter the residence without permission and went inside. They quickly discovered Falkenstern's body and arrested Kwiecinski, who had spent 2 days in the apartment with the corpse. He insisted he hadn't done anything wrong, telling the officers that he had simply discovered Falkenstern's body and was afraid to tell anyone because he's used to getting wrongfully blamed for things he didn't do. Kwiecinski eventually admitted to strangling Falkenstern to death with a vacuum cleaner cord during an argument over some sausages they had received from Meals on Wheels. In February 2024, he pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and mutilation of a dead body. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, which, at his age, most likely means that he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 7. The murder of Nicole Quavas Ingram. In February 2024, the badly decomposed remains of 38-year-old Nicole Quavas Ingram were found buried in the basement of a Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania home. Her body had been wrapped in a tarp and tied with rope and electrical cords, and there were 2 plastic bags over her head. In an attempt to mask the stench of death, someone had covered her shallow grave with mothballs. Quavas Ingram had traveled to Wilkes-Barre from Saginaw, Michigan, 10 months earlier, in April 2023, to visit someone who she thought was her friend. While there, she was held captive and tortured for several weeks by 5 suspects who accused her of abusing a child. In April 2024, police arrested 43-year-old Desiree Lynette, her daughter, 24-year-old Sarah Doyle, 43-year-old Jason Race, 39-year-old Faith Beamer, and 54-year-old William Wolfe on suspicion of murder. The suspects are also facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, aggravated assault, and abuse of a corpse. According to prosecutors, Quavas Ingram was handcuffed to a basement post and beaten, stabbed, kicked, stomped on, and strangled. Prior to her death, a witness had seen her drooling and with a shaved head in the home's kitchen. The prolonged torture came to an end when Jason Race discovered that Quavas Ingram had soiled herself and stomped on her head until she died. About a month after the discovery of Quavas Ingram's body, police found the remains of the home's former owner, 69-year-old Deborah Fox, in a wooded area behind a hotel. Fox was related to Jason Race and had previously sought an order of protection against him, writing in a court petition that Race had held her captive in her bedroom, assaulted her, threatened to kill her, and forced her to use crack cocaine. Detectives are investigating to determine whether the women's deaths are linked, and the defendants are being held without bond at various facilities throughout the state. In addition to the murder case, 4 of the suspects are facing charges for the alleged kidnapping of a man who was held captive and beaten inside the home in July of 2023. Much like the case involving Quavas Ingram, the abductors falsely accused the man of harming a child. He eventually managed to escape and called the police, which helped lead to the discovery of Quavas Ingram's body. Number 6. The murder of Shakira Spencer. 35-year-old mother of 2, Shakira Spencer, was last seen struggling to walk outside her West London apartment building in September 2022. 2 weeks later, neighbors noticed maggots crawling beneath her front door and called the police, who entered the flat and found her decomposing body on a bunk bed. Roughly a year before her death, Spencer had befriended her neighbor at the time, 39-year-old Ashana Studholm, who introduced her to drugs and the party scene. These lifestyle changes led to the breakup of Spencer's relationship, and she became increasingly isolated from her friends and family. Prosecutors accused Studholm and 2 other suspects, 44-year-old Lisa Richardson and 26-year-old Sean Pendlebury, of torturing, starving, and beating Spencer over a prolonged period. During that time, the trio forced her to work as a courtesan, scalded her feet with hot water, burned her face with a lighter and a spray can, and fed her nothing but ketchup packets. In August 2022, police officers spotted Spencer outside Studholme's flat and became concerned over her emaciated and weak appearance. She refused to speak with him and went inside. 10 days later, Studholme, Richardson and Pendlebury carried out their final attacks on Spencer, then drove her to her flat and left her there to die. Spencer's loved ones described her as a gentle, trusting and vulnerable person who wanted to be liked and was therefore eager to please. She looked practically unrecognizable in a photo captured by the police weeks before her death, which showed a gaunt and disheveled version of a woman who had been healthy and vibrant just months earlier. In court, the defendants blamed each other while attempting to mitigate their own role in the crimes leading to Spencer's death. In December 2023, a jury found all three suspects guilty of murder and preventing a lawful burial. They were each sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 34 years before becoming eligible for parole. While handing down the sentences, the judge acknowledged that Pendlebury has a low IQ and is a follower rather than a leader, but that he was just as responsible for Spencer's murder as his co-conspirators. The judge also admonished the trio for refusing to take ownership of their wrongdoings and failing to show any remorse for their actions, including when they took the stand to testify in their own defense during the trial. He forewarned the convicted killers that they may never be released from prison due to the dangers they pose to society. Number 5. Nion Sanders. An Alabama man who was out on bond for allegedly murdering someone in 2022 is accused of killing a second victim in November 2024 after waiting for his ankle monitor to die. According to prosecutors, Nion Sanders deliberately failed to charge the device before going to an apartment complex in a part of Mobile that he was banned from under court order. Less than 4 hours later, he fatally shot 25-year-old Joseph Evans Jr. and the second victim, who survived with non-life-threatening injuries. Sanders was a minor when he and his brother Kevin were arrested for the first homicide, which is scheduled to go to trial in January 2025. They were both released on bond and were reportedly together when the second murder occurred. 2 days after Evans was killed, police apprehended the brothers. Nion is facing murder and robbery charges in the more recent case. Kevin has not been charged in connection with Evans's murder, but his bond was revoked for being in an area that the pair were banned from. The victim's family was outraged to learn that Nion was free to kill again in the first place. Police blamed AccuPoint, the private monitoring company that was tasked with overseeing the county's GPS-wearing defendants. The company had failed to notify law enforcement that Sanders' ankle monitor had died, and the county had encountered similar issues with AccuPoint in the past. Just a month before Evans was killed, a murder defendant violated the terms of his release by visiting a casino in Mississippi. AccuPoint failed to notify the authorities in a timely fashion, claiming they had just discovered the violation when they finally informed the police of it. Following Evans's murder, a judge cut ties with the company and ordered the local sheriff's office to directly oversee the county's electronic monitoring program. In the meantime, Sanders has pleaded not guilty to his new charges and remains held without bail. Number 4. Cole Younger. 41-year-old Brandy Snowfly was stabbed to death in May of 2024 at the Roadway Inn in Rapid City, South Dakota. After murdering Snowfly, prosecutors claimed that Younger carjacked a ride-share driver at knife point. The victim drove Younger to a factory and waited outside for him, then drove him to a Circle K gas station where the suspect ordered him out of his car at knife point. A Pennington County Sheriff's deputy pulled the vehicle over a short while later and arrested Younger without incident. Later that morning, police responded to a report of an unresponsive woman at the Roadway Inn. Inside one of the rooms, they found Snowfly dead with a slash wound to her neck. Investigators connected Younger to the crime using surveillance footage, which showed him leaving the hotel alone after entering the room with the victim. It's believed that the two knew each other prior to Snowfly's death. Younger is charged with first-degree murder and first-degree robbery. The robbery charge carries a prison sentence of up to 25 years in the event of a conviction, while the murder charge is punishable by life in prison or even the death penalty. After missing his initial court hearing due to substance use, Younger returned to the courtroom the next day and refused to speak to the judge. He was later accused of deliberately using stalling tactics to avoid facing the consequences of his actions. Younger was denied bond and remains in custody at the Pennington County Jail. His alleged reasons for killing Snowfly and the circumstances leading up to the murder have yet to be revealed. Number 3. Sincere Patrick Hayes. 22-year-old exotic dancer Mercedes Vega worked at an adult club in Tempe, Arizona, but it wasn't her permanent plan. She dreamed of making a living as a full-time personal trainer and was planning to open her own gym, but she never got that opportunity because she was found dead inside a burning car along Interstate 10 in Tonopah in April 2023. Vega had been beaten, shot, and set on fire by her killer, who also poured bleach down the young woman's throat. She died from burns and smoke inhalation, indicating that she was still alive when her killer set her ablaze and left her there to die roughly 60 miles from her home. Just hours before the discovery of Vega's body, a surveillance camera captured footage of her entering the parking garage of her apartment complex. She was planning to meet with friends that evening, but abruptly called and cancelled, claiming that she had to work and was never seen or heard from again. During their search for Vega, her family found what appeared to be blood in the parking garage, leading them to suspect that she had been abducted. The day after Vega's murder, her Dodge Charger was found abandoned in the middle of the road about a mile from her apartment. 19 months passed before an arrest was finally made. In November 2024, 22-year-old Sincere Patrick Hayes was picked up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, on a first-degree murder charge and is currently awaiting extradition to Arizona. Records show that he was arrested for at least 2 incidents in 2024, both of which occurred in Tennessee and resulted in gun charges. While police have released few details about the investigation's findings, a law enforcement spokesperson said that they do not believe Vega and Hayes knew each other and that they think Vega was forced into a car and kidnapped. The authorities have also revealed that more arrests are forthcoming. Today's topic was requested by Nightshade XD5846. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Daniel Vance. On September 1st, 2024, 46-year-old Teresa Johnson was found dead inside a Saginaw, Michigan hotel room. She had been deceased for several days. Police made the discovery after another motel guest called 911 at 1:15 in the morning and reported seeing Johnson's body concealed beneath a blanket on the bed in her room. The caller had been invited into the room by Johnson's partner, 46-year-old Daniel J. Vance, who had fled the scene by the time law enforcement arrived. Barnes was apprehended more than 12 hours later after a tipster spotted him and reported his whereabouts. Police found him hiding in a wooded area and arrested him on suspicion of torture, assault with intent to murder, and concealing the death of an individual. Based on the condition of Johnson's body, it appeared as though she had met with foul play. She had been badly beaten, and Vance reportedly admitted to abusing and torturing Johnson for 1 to 2 weeks leading up to her death. According to court documents, he beat the victim with his fists, elbows, boots, and a ratchet, burned her face with a crack pipe, and shut her up by using needle nose pliers on her mouth. When Johnson became unresponsive, Vance failed to seek help, and he told nobody about her death while keeping her corpse inside the motel room and attempting to conceal it. During a court hearing several weeks later, the prosecution revealed that they were still waiting for an autopsy report containing Johnson's cause and manner of death. Assistant prosecutor Melissa J. Hoover told the judge that there was a high probability that Vance would be charged with murder and that she expected the report to become available in about a month. Vance waived his right to a speedy court process, stating that he also wanted to know Johnson's cause of death. As of November 2024, the proceedings are currently on hold, and a murder charge has not been added to the case. In the meantime, Vance remains held without bail at the Saginaw County Jail. Number 1. Joseph Howell. In May of 2023, police in Ithaca, New York, received a tip that a local missing man, 33-year-old Thomas Rath, had vanished from a notorious homeless encampment under suspicious circumstances known as the Jungle. He had ended up there after his addiction to methamphetamine spiraled out of control. Law enforcement launched a large-scale search for Rath and executed 40 search warrants over a 2-month period leading up to the discovery of his body in a shallow grave on state land. Further investigation revealed that Rath had been forcibly abducted from the jungle and taken to a barn, where he was tortured for hours in front of an audience. Later on, 3 of Rath's captors forced him into a vehicle. During the drive, Rath pleaded for his life. He made a last-ditch effort to escape his kidnappers after the truck stopped at the edge of a wooded area, but was shot dead. 2 months later, the driver, Robert Heinz, told the police about what he had witnessed. Plagued by guilt that he could no longer hold in, he led law enforcement to Rath's body. 13 people were charged in connection with the case, including the alleged mastermind, Joseph M. Howell. In 2024, Howell was found guilty of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and 3 counts of witness intimidation. He's currently awaiting sentencing, which is scheduled for January 2025, and is facing a maximum sentence of life without parole. 41-year-old David C. Maycumber and 48-year-old Angel Baez are also facing murder charges, while the rest of the defendants are charged with first-degree kidnapping. Thanks for watching. If you were offered $5 million, but the catch is that you'd have to spend the last 10 years of your life behind bars, would you do it? Let us know in the comment section below.